All right, driving the culture forward. This is HYPEBEAST Radio. I'm your host, Ben Rosen, and today we are sitting down with Abe Burmeister of Outlier, the Brooklyn-based clothing company, startup. But what else? What other words could we use for it?
I don't. What else? I mean, we make clothing straight up. A lot of it's about raw materials too. You know, I think we think of ourselves as like materialists in a way. Like we're playing with fabrics and structures like that nobody else is. So.
And to give a little bit of context to the listeners, we're in your studio right now, your guys' offices in Brooklyn, and we are sitting pretty much in front of what I guess we could call like the fabric library, and it's pretty impressive. So I mean, you were saying you guys are a bit of a materialist thing, and a lot of
those are just the colors too.
Those are just colorways?
Yeah, the fabric library is over there. It's like 6 shells deep over there.
Okay, in which case it is a lot more comprehensive than I initially thought. So. Yeah. Your guys' clothing is, like you said, very technical, very material-driven. Is that something that has been a part of the company from the get-go?
Pretty much. You know, I started because I couldn't find pants I wanted. I was looking for something that performed a little bit better, you know, that could handle some rain, some stress, you know, like...
You were biking to work.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, and I really just thought I was going to go shopping and get a better pair of pants. And then I couldn't find it, and you know, like what it took, like I kept on looking, and I finally found a material that I was like, this would make the best pants, but the company was only making shorts out of them. Mm-hmm. And I actually wrote to them and I was like, hey, you ever plan on making pants out of this? And they were like, no. And so I was like, all right, well,
dibs.
I'm in. It wasn't really dibs because I really would have been much happier at that point if somebody had just sold me the pants. And it cost me a couple $1,000s to make that first pair, you know. So, but you know, once I dove in, I was like, this is cool. And then something like really, really early on, what happened like me and I met Tyler actually, who was like kind of looking at the same materials from a shirt perspective, which was really cool. But we realized really early on that, you know, we had just walked in assuming that that companies that were doing outdoor gear were using the best materials in the world. And they use pretty good materials. I'm not going to knock them, but like we realized that there was this whole other level of stuff that just wasn't getting used that was better. And we're like, wow, this stuff is amazing. Why isn't anybody using it? And I mean, the answer is sort of that it's really expensive. And that's where the internet came in, I guess. Because we like realized that, you know, it was 2008 where we started basically, and we realized that, I was better at making websites than I was at making clothes. I was just kind of figuring that part out.
Yeah, and you ran a blog network before you had.
All right, we're taking it way back.
I'm Nardwuar.
Yeah,
I'm turning into Nardwuar now.
Yeah.
So what was the initial blog network that you were running? Because there are some people involved with it.
All right. We're going all the way back to something called Abstract Dynamics. So it was like, it was my blog originally, and I built like the time Movable Type was like the hot blog software, and I'd installed it and figured out how to run it, and it would let you make multiple blogs. And this is getting really, really nerdy. Basically, what happened is like Blogger, you know, was like the easy way to get a blog, but they didn't have RSS feeds, which was like if you. Now
if you're a blog nerd,
yeah,
it's essential.
And then these people would like, I'd be reading their blogs and I'd be kind of annoyed they didn't have RSS feeds, but then they would complain. They start complaining about bloggers. So the first person that I really got involved was Sasha Frere-Jones, you know, who was at that time, I think he was at the Village Voice. So Sasha was at the Village Voice, and I think he was at the Village Voice then. He eventually became the New Yorker's music critic for a long time.
And now he's at Genius, I believe.
He was at Genius.
There, but he was there for a little
I don't
bit.
think he lasted that many months at Genius. He went out to L.A., and then he got fired for some scandal out there. That's the last time. Yeah. But yeah, I like reached out to Sasha, and I was like, he was complaining about Blogger, and I was like, well, you know, I could just put you on my Movable Type installation, and he was like, cool, let's do this. And like, you know, it was sort of selfish. I just wanted the RSS feed, but it was cool. He got on it, and then we started pulling a lot of other people on there. So, you know, there's a lot. So like Philip Sherburne like ran on it for a long time, who's like, you know, at Pitchfork now. One of the craziest ones, well, probably the most famous was this guy called Mark Fisher, rest in peace. He ran a blog called K-Punk on Abstract Dynamics for a long time. It's like sort of this like wild critical theory stuff out of the UK. And now he's got a bunch of books published, and sadly he passed away last year. So, but there's a lot of material from that originated from abstract dynamics that are now in his books and are out published. And another one that ended up like that is actually even crazier. This guy Reza I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Reza Negarestani. He was like basically, I don't even know if he's real.
It could be like a nom de plume kind of thing.
He's like an Iranian philosopher, and he was all about this stuff called hyperstition, which is this sort of blending of fiction and theory together into, and that was wild. And that was all like a sort of like chain of like these people. I'd interact with them via email, but a lot of them I never met in person. We would just email back and forth about blog stuff, and so Reza, I assume he exists.
He's listening to the pod.
There's a book over here. Like, it was definitely a book published. So, but it was out there. That was pushing it for me even. But and there were a lot of other people on there as well. So
you were doing a lot of this like kind of web dev kind of online stuff, and then you transitioned into like techwear, basically.
Well, the blogging was just a side thing. I never really made any money off of it, or like, it was just like.
So what was your primary hustle at the time?
I mean, when I started, I was doing animation, nice. And then I moved into like more like information design kind of stuff. So, but I had an animation company called One Infinity with me and some friends from college back in the early 2000s when this blogging stuff really started.
And so when you transitioned to Outlier, were you like much of a fashion guy? Were you thinking about clothes all the time? What kind of happened that, apart from the riding the bike to work, but...
I mean, this is taking it way, way back if you want. So,
I love origin stories. That's like literally...
Well, this is like the pre-origin story. We have like the basic one that I've told like many times, it's like the myth or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's true. It's we didn't make it up. But the pre-story... in 2001, I was running this animation company with some friends. They were in San Francisco. I was in New York, and my broadband sucked. It was just really bad. So I had this backup internet connection, but using this thing called a Ricochet, which was this wireless modem network, high-speed wireless. It was really crazy, way ahead of its time. It was in like 14 cities. It was like actually faster than my broadband at the time. It was just this little wireless thing about the size of like a small hard drive, basically. And so you could take it out to a cafe, wherever. Like, they'd installed these receivers on lampposts. And so I was like, my main internet would go down. I'd be on this Ricochet all the time, and I have my cell phone, and I realized I was like doing all my work on a laptop and this wireless network and my cell phone. I was like, I don't need to be anywhere. I mean, I needed to have a Ricochet connection, I guess. And so I lost my apartment at a certain point, and right kind of after I'd sort of made this realization, and I was like, why? I really didn't feel like looking for another apartment, and I was going back and forth to San Francisco all the time. I was like, I can just travel. Like, I can do this like on my laptop and my cell phone, and I can just see the world, do my work, and go. And so that's what I did. And so, but in order to do that, I had to reduce everything. I sold all my records. I sold all my records, which was huge back in the day. I had like,
it's your
literally like a ton of vinyl or something sitting there. And so I reduced everything down to like a carry-on bag. And so like I had to think about every single thing that went into that bag. And so I really was thinking about, I cared about clothes a little bit, but I wasn't like deep clothing person. I never like thought of a career in fashion or anything like that. But during this process, I really started thinking about like, what were the good clothes? What should I keep? What should I get rid of? What was the most versatile? And so that really, really started the process in a deep way. And I lived like that for 4 years. And the crazy part of the story is like literally like the 2 days after I started this whole thing, the whole Ricochet company went out of business. So I was like totally reliant on, I was like, all right, I just need this Ricochet. It works in like 14 cities in America. Like I can go to any of them, LA, New York, San Francisco, right? Chicago. And,
This is before like hotspots were everywhere. This is like kind of like
Yeah, it was really wild actually. So I had this experience. I was like, it was almost like the warm up actually when they went out of business, because I'd moved out of my apartment, but I was like house sitting in a friend, like in Manhattan on 13th Street, and this Ricochet thing is gone. I'm like, fuck, I have no.
I just threw everything out.
And there were, I remember this, it was literally, I had to like upload some files and my internet connection's gone. And there were 3 public Wi-Fi spots in New York City. It was like Wi-Fi was this brand new thing. And there were 3 of them. And one of them was in Washington Square Park. It was somebody at NYU was running it. And so I literally, Washington Square Park had already kind of been cleaned up now, but I guess this was like the last corner of it left. I was like sitting in the corner of Washington Square Park trying to get this Wi-Fi connection while people are like selling crack around me. And I was just like, it was wild. And those days are gone. And there's Wi-Fi everywhere, obviously. So, but it was a lot of learning. It was an experience.
Still a little bit of crack in Washington Square Park, but some things never change. And then, so you get into tech wear and, like you said, like the fabrics, the materials of all of this stuff. And I think it's cool to know now the background that you had in tech and development and animation even, because I think that now what you're working at is very much like the intersection of like this kind of fashion and technology, like that kind of intersection. Has that been an interesting space for you to work in?
Yeah, no, totally. It's amazing. Like we're interested in like fashion and technology, not in this like kind of like futuristic, like imaginary, like put a computer in your clothes or whatever kind of thing, but in this kind of like what actually works, but that changes the way clothing works, right? So we work a lot with technology that's not really new per se, but it's not being used properly. It's kind of like, I kind of think of it as like slow technology, right? There's like this like fast technology. Oh, something's new. Let's use it. Let's smash it around. It's like the Facebook move fast and break things. And they broke our political system while moving fast. So this is more like the slow technology approach where like, things like washable wool, that's not new, but it takes time for these things to like kind of work their way through the system, the kinks to get ironed out, and to like make it into something that like people want to buy and wear, not just as like a novelty item, but as something that's better, right? So we work a lot with things like that. And we're always pushing it.
And you guys always, and I think that when you were saying like people want to buy it, like you said, like I think the first pair of pants was probably the most expensive prototype that you had to do or something like that. But these are slightly pricey garments, but people really go out of their way for them. I think you guys do have kind of like, would you say that you have like a cult following?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably fair. I mean, there's definitely people. If you go on our subreddit,
Yeah, you guys have your own subreddit of like literal like you have a fandom, I guess is how you put it, for like a fashion brand or something like that. Because I think, and for people that might not be as familiar, you don't do like a full collection. You don't do like a fall winter 2018, for example. I think, and not to give away what's on the boards around us, but it's like a weekly drop almost.
Yeah, no, we're trying to release new product
every single week.
Every week, pretty much.
With no breaks in between seasons, or how do you break it down?
There's not really any breaks. Like sometimes like what you get in a week is kind of like a return of something from the past rather than like a brand new thing. But then some weeks there's like three new things or something, right? So
and it comes, I think, usually on Tuesdays, right? It's like
Tuesdays, 1:00 New York time is the drop.
And how long have you guys been implementing that system? Has it been one thing a week, or is it?
We went weekly. Was it last year or the year before? Wow, I can't even remember. We were at bi-weekly for a while, like every 2 weeks, and then we went weekly. I think it was 2 years ago now, but I can't.
It's like
these
like
weeks
a blur.
all blur together.
Yeah. And do you find that that's like a challenge to make something new every week, or what was the decision behind it?
I mean, it's just the challenge is clothing is slow, right? Like developing clothing takes a long time, and like ordering fabric. People, even fast fashion, like people talk about like Zara doing things in 2 weeks and stuff. But even then, they're like, that's when the fabric's sitting there. Like they're not like custom ordering the fabric, having the colors done. Like they the things can happen really quickly in these kind of very particular circumstances. But if you want to do a product, you know, it takes us 4 to 6 months, like from when we make the decision to for it to end up, you know, online. And then the development is like an even longer process, and it really varies. So like a lot of big companies are developing, you know, 18 months before it's in the stores or something like that. And then at the same time, we're online, right? The only place you can buy our stuff is online. And online, there's something new every hour, you know? There's like a new meme that you got to be up on, right? And so like, it's the challenge is really how do you make the two work together? We're an online company, right? So we got to have something new on some kind of regularity. Otherwise, like, why come back? Why visit? You know, you're going to forget about it. So it's like, how do we bring together this kind of like very old industrial clothing production speed, right? Which is measured in months, years, quarters, seasons, shows. Right? Versus like the internet, which is like about
instant.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the real challenge. And so that's kind of like where we came to like just building like a rhythm and like, and I guess I learned this from the blogging network and to a certain extent as well, you know, like when people know that they can come back, it doesn't really matter if you're like, you know, some blogs put stuff up every hour or every 10 minutes or whatever it is. And some of them it's every week, some of it's every month, some of them, a lot of them are random, but it's like when you have this rhythm, people know to check back. They're like, oh, if it's monthly, like there might be something on this blog, I'll check it. And so we just try to establish a rhythm. And so we're at 2 weeks for quite a while, and then we switched to a week, and it works quite well. But I mean, part of the thing that you have to think about too is that, you know, there's 52 weeks in a year, so that's 52 products essentially, and sometimes we have a little bit more than, you know, I think we did about 70 new products last year. But if you think about a runway show, you know, there might be 40 looks and there's like an average of like 3 products in each look or something, right? So that's 120, and that's one season right there. So if you're doing 2 seasons of a fashion brand with, you know, that's 240 products, right, like just going down the runway.
Stacks up, and you're kind of like...
And some brands do way more than that, right? So we're actually making less product than your average fashion brand.
But like, every single product is considered.
Yeah, exactly. So like we're putting more time and energy into each product. And we do what we call experiments, lots of what we call experiments, which are designed to be a little bit faster and looser. And then we have like when we really drop like big products, you know, there's a lot of energy that's going in there.
I thought all the drops were experiments now. So it's pretty like much, certain things are experiments?
Yeah, I mean, we changed the threshold for what we consider experiments, so it's pretty open. If there's some newness to it, then it's an experiment, like some element of risk that we're taking.
What's the riskiest experiment that you've put out so far?
I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I mean, on a dollar value, you know, we just did the Shelter from the Storm, which was like a tape jacket. We were doing it at KTC, which is this like incredibly high-tech factory in southern China. And that's definitely the one that we put the biggest dollar risk involved. But at the same time, we put a lot of energy into the development, and there was a long development process. So,
right. I mean, we were just looking at that, and there's like so much to unpack about it, like from zippers, tape seams, like there's a lot of, like, I think the product description for everything on the Outlier is that you look at it and like on the surface it's like, okay, black tape seam jacket, whatever, but there's so much going on that I think is difficult to convey on a website almost. Is that a challenge? Because like you said, it's only available online.
Yeah, it's definitely part of the art, and we spent a lot of time trying to communicate. That's actually how we started doing the experiments, was actually trying to build a structure where we could spend less time trying to communicate on these like smaller experiments. But yeah, no, it's a lot of, you know, just trying to be clear, like trying to tell it how it is and like communicate what's going on inside the, you know, whether it's the material or how we're putting it together or what it does and what you can do with it. But yeah, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out just how to communicate. But going back to risk, because there's a flip, you know, there's like the financial risk that we put out there, but then there's product risk. So I think there's we've been putting out a lot of, like, there's a whole bunch of products that start internally as cocoons. Mm-hmm. And those are always risky because, like, who the hell buys a cocoon, you know? So we did a Goswick cocoon, was like this very, like, I mean, we only did a couple of them, but it was just like, you know, it's like this incredibly fine single origin merino that we work with, 5 microns. So you're talking like a luxury wool,
Super,
essentially.
like, light and thin.
And so we do like t-shirts and turtlenecks with that. And so there's a certain risk there. But then when you take that and make it to a cocoon, which is just like kind of some like weird amorphous transforming garment that you like really can only wear around your house, like that,
Right.
you know, that's risky too, right? So there's different levels to it.
And was the decision to make it like available only online, direct to consumer, was that from the get-go as well? Was it like because you have this internet experience?
I mean, the decision to start like mostly online was from the get-go. Again, I knew more about making websites than I knew about making clothes from the
Right.
start. And Tyler had actually had this interesting experience. He had been working in a record store that was about to go out of business, and then he like realized that they could just start putting stuff on eBay, and they like saved the record store basically by just realizing it was like this sweet spot where like CDs still had like a decent amount of value.
But it was the shopping experience that people had a
Well,
problem?
there was like liquidity in the CD. Like people weren't buying tons of CDs because there were MP3s out there, but it was before like
Streaming.
yeah,
all
streaming
that.
and everything. So like there still was a certain value to it, and so like by getting it online, like selling the CDs online, they basically made a much bigger record store instead of just being a local record store. They were a national record store, and kind of saved that shop. And so he had that experience, and I had built websites and played around with kind of these ideas. I had like built a prototype of like a blog as an e-commerce shop for a client. They never implemented it, but I'd been playing with that idea. So we understood that side of it. And then the huge thing was obviously that we could sell things for a lot less money, right? Because we're cutting out the middleman. And in apparel, you know, you're talking about a 3x markup that the middleman is putting
Right.
on there often. Yeah, and so that saves a lot of money. There's this very big space in between like what the wholesale price is and the retail prices that as a brand you can work with. And you have you have a lot of extra costs than besides just wholesaling, right? You have to take photos and market it and do all these different things and handle the transactions and shipping and all that stuff. So, but yeah, we kind of like dove into that middle ground. But early on we had a sort of a small shop like right around the corner here. That was basically our friend's living room, but they lived on the first floor. It was like a storefront. So we had that we would open on the weekends, and we did a little bit of wholesale and played with that stuff too. So a lot of it was just learning in the lesson, you know, like
Experiments.
Yeah, exactly. Just constantly testing, learning, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then I don't know. It was like that was a big leap. Actually, when we cut out wholesale, that was like a big kind of like moment, because it was a real amount of our business, not humongous, but it was 10% of our business or something, and we're just like, we're gonna cut this out and focus on online and
trim the fat and hone in.
And it was, you know, we were scared. We were like, because, you know, we didn't know how many people had like learned about us from going to these shops or like wanted to try it on or whatever. And but as soon as we did it, we actually realized that, you know, we were worried sales would go down. Sales went up, and we were able to really focus on what we were good at.
And do you think that might be because of like an exclusivity factor? Like, because like the drops do sell out. Like even for like the shelter from the storm, I believe, like these are things that sell out in like 15 minutes. Do you think that plays a part in it?
This was before we had that kind of rhythm. And so, you know, we're still like getting our you know, sea legs or whatever. And it was, I think it was more that it took away the excuse. That's my theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but my theory, like when we went through it, I was like, wow, you know, like, because we used to try to have like a shop in every city, right? Just one shop. And, you know, some of them stocked pretty well, but a lot of them didn't. But there was always an excuse. Like if you lived in Seattle, you know, like, and you knew there was a shop that stocked it, you could be like, oh, I'm going to go to that shop and try it on. Like, but that, you know, that could be next weekend or the weekend after. It's always next week, right? And we just took that excuse away, and it was like, well, there's only one way to do it. You got to buy it online. And so I think that's my theory of why it worked, but I don't know.
And another aspect of the company that even when we're in here is like it has this walled garden vibe. Like it definitely has this sort of like tech meets fashion kind of thing, which means that I don't think you guys have never really collaborated with anybody, right?
No, we've done collaborations.
Really?
We used to do a lot. I mean, the biggest one was with Vans. We did shoes with Vans a while ago, and we did shoes with Fight as well. We did like a jacket with DQM like way back in the day. We just did one. We sort of stopped. We kind of chilled on the collaborations, but we just did one with a company called By Bore out of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, which was, we love them. They built their own software to make to control knitting machines, and so they have like basically pixel level control over knitting. Whoa. It's pretty cool stuff. So we did a bandana with them. We basically took our snap bandana form, worked with their materials, and designed the whole series of 3 bandanas. That was in December that dropped. But for the most part, yeah, we're not, the collaborations. What we learned with collaborations is like the ones that work really well are really simple, and they're like you only making pretty basic, like kind of like surface level changes that, like, if they build a signifier that something's changed, you get a story. But we like to get deep. Like we like to get like down to like the roots of it. So like when we're doing a shoe, with Vans, we're able to like change the surface of a shoe, right? But we wanted to like change every aspect of the shoe, and like that just wasn't an option. It was like, oh yeah, you can reskin it, like use this material on the outside instead of this, do these colors, change this and that. But like to get in like the insoles and the outsoles and the midsoles and how it's stitched together, and like, that's the level we want to work at. And on a collaborative level, it's really hard. I
was going to ask, because I feel like, for outsiders looking in, even though we work at that outlet that has all of the kind of exposure of sneaker collaborations and stuff, but I feel like even we don't know the nitty gritty of how it works. Like there's like a limit to how far you can take the collaboration.
Oh,
right?
I mean, people are really just changing the outside of the shoes, right? Like even a big one, like, like the Virgil Abloh stuff, like, he's not really like going inside the shoes. They're like, he's
writing what's inside the shoe on the outside of the shoe.
Exactly. But he's tearing them apart a little bit, and like like changing how things are sewn together and stuff, which is more than a lot of collaborations would be, right? But that was a big project, right? Most people don't really get that far. It's like change the colors, change the materials, put some kind of like signifier on there.
Co-branding.
Yeah, and when it works really well, you get amazing shoes out of it, but you're not changing how the shoes are built, really. And to do that, you basically have to design a new shoe, and that's like a huge process, right? Like, these companies don't drop that many new shoes legitimately. They drop new colorways. They
might drop one new Jordan a year,
Yeah.
And so you're releasing 1 to 3 products a week. They're selling out pretty regularly. You have a pretty fervent following. You have a subreddit. What sort of is the next step for you guys? Like, do you guys want to collaborate more, or do you like to keep things like in this lab?
No, we right this year, I think we really want to tighten up, actually. Like we kind of pushed out, we started playing around with furniture last year.
Really?
We didn't put any of it out. There's some like prototypes kicking around back here. But we kind of started pushing pretty far out there, and then we were like, all right, like we're getting a little distracted from the basics, and so like, like we want to kind of really focus on the core right now, and like just tighten that up, and like make, basically like what I really want to do is make Levi's 501s, like the new ones, right, or a Burberry trench coat, right? These kind of like iconic products that like last forever, right? Like that. And that's really, really hard. There's only a few of them out there, and we certainly haven't done it yet, right? But we do all this experimentation and play with new stuff. But the idea is to find and learn things from that process that we can put into these really core products. So like, yeah, we're experimenting all the time, releasing new products all the time, but we have core products that we're, always have in stock, and that we're constantly releasing, and then we're trying to push them further, iterate on them, figure out new ways to like really make them better. And like, it took Levi's 40, 50 years before the Levi 501 became like the icon that it is. And Burberry, Burberry started out as a fabric company, right? And it took them decades and decades before like they got to this like iconic trench coat form. So that's sort of our goal, is to like keep on
Work
playing
toward
around.
that.
And but at the end of the day, like I just want to make one amazing thing.
One piece is basically the goal.
Yeah, like one piece that can last a century, you know, like, and so it's gonna be hard.
Yeah, and to go back to like a really core thing about the company, like my favorite thing is that when I look up what outlier means, like obviously there's like the straightforward definition, like the kind of like, oh, that's an extreme, but the other one is that it's basically a commuter,
Yeah.
right? And I guess that kind of, on the one hand, it makes perfect sense. Like you were commuting to work, you wanted a new pair of pants. I get that, but is there like a downside to it? Like, did you have to fight being like the biker company at the beginning?
Oh yeah. Well, there's there's two levels here. First of all, the outlier, like, 'cause we had the name, and I actually registered the domain in 2007, and then we incorporated like that 2008, the summer 2008, and we literally got the incorporation papers back, and we're like celebrating, and then like a week or two later, like there's this announcement of this like new Malcolm Gladwell book, like Outliers, and I was like, what the fuck? Like they just took our name from us, and it worked out fine. But for the record, we were there before them, and so it has nothing to do with that book. But yeah, the word was like a lot more. It was less of a common usage word when we started with the name. But then the bike side, yeah, like when we started, it was very intentional. We were a bike company for the first year and change, and it was super intentional. I'd actually knew that there was more that the pants could do. Like we started with one pair of pants, right? And we focused on like bike commuting and like bike to work pants, right? And that focus was very intentional. That was a design focus. We wanted to like narrow in the problem set that we're trying to solve, right? And I knew that it also had other uses, that they were just amazing, like business travel pants, and they were amazing just everyday pants as well. But to start, you need to focus, right? And so I wanted to really narrow down like what problems we were looking at, and so it was about biking. But then, like I talked about earlier, like we really fell in love with the technical materials, and we realized that we were kind of making like anti-cycling clothes. Like the whole point was not, there was clothes out there that you could wear that if you wanted to look like a cyclist, no problem. There's tons of great clothes out there for that. The point we were trying to do is that like these were clothes that you didn't look like a cyclist. We weren't like really a cycling brand.
Change out of them when you got off
exactly.
your bike.
Well, the point is that like they were just, like when you get on the subway, or you get into a car, like whatever clothes you have, like in this day and age, are going to work, right? That actually didn't used to be the case. I mean, men used to wear like top hats. You can't wear a top hat in a car, right? Women used to wear like petticoats, right? You can't wear a petticoat on the subway, I guess you could, but people would hate you.
Yeah.
And so like these things changed, right? And to adapt to the way that people move around. So if you're moving around on a bike, like it should be all clothes should work on a bike.
Right.
Maybe not like what you wear to your wedding or like to the Met Ball or something, but outside of that, like, whatever you put on should work. It shouldn't fall apart just because you get on a bike, right? So that's where we were, and then we realized that, we wanted to be, we wanted to get beyond the bike, and we weren't really a bike company. We were in love with the materials, and we were trying to make better performing clothing, like for everybody. And so first we were just like, oh, let's just photograph stuff off the bike, and it seemed to work. We'd be like, oh yeah, people aren't calling us a bike company, and then we do another photo shoot on a bike, and then all of a sudden we were a bike company again.
I was gonna say, like, did you have to like tell everyone like, okay, no more bike photo shoots?
I mean, it's really funny. Like it still happens. I saw somebody like I've known for a long time, like this weekend, who was like, yeah, how's the bike clothing going, right? And my relatives forget about it, like, they're like, how's that bike thing going? And I'm like, well, it hasn't been about bikes in like 8-9 years now, but
past the mashed potatoes.
Yeah. But we had to just cut it out, right? So the functionality is actually still there in a lot of these products, right? We're not intentionally designing for cycling, but most of our products work really well on a bike, but it's not what we're focusing on. But we had to cut it out. We never photograph on a bike. We never talk about it. It's just kind of like it's a piece of history. We don't deny the history at all. And, we still love riding bikes. It's fun. A great way to get around the city. But I was on a city bike just a couple hours ago. But, like we had to like really just like cut that stuff out because we were getting pigeonholed, and we needed to be more than that.
And how did you, besides cutting it out of the imagery, how did you kind of move forward from that pigeonholing? Like, did you find that you had to fight back in other ways, or was it just kind of embracing the technical side of it?
It was embracing, you know, we changed, like, so we really focused on what we called tailored performance for quite a while. I'm not going to name any names, but that language has been co-opted by other larger brands, you know, 6 or 7 years after we did it. So, but yeah, that's sort of like what we really focused on for a while. And then we like really realized that what we were in love with was the materials, right? You know, at first it was, you know, we were in love with the materials, but we kind of thought of it in terms of performance. Now we really think about it in terms of the materials themselves. So
I also noticed that it's like it kind of shifted from, like you said, the initial biking and performance stuff, that it almost seems, and I think a lot of the library behind you almost supports it, is that it seems almost architectural now. Is that true to say? Is there like an architectural side of it?
I mean, yeah, there's an element of architecture that we definitely have been looking a lot at, like brutalism, which is an architecture movement, and like, you know what, like, and there's a sort of an interesting formula to it. So that's something that we've been looking at a lot lately. It's certainly not the only thing. I mean, the architecture section is like 2 shelves out of, what are there, like, I don't know, 20 shelves here or something. So it's over here. But, you know, there's photography is a much bigger part. And then there's a lot of, like, you know, design, and then obviously fashion and art becomes like, you know, we pull from everywhere. Philosophy, you know.
A lot like the blog network, really.
Yeah, no, it's like, you know, to get new ideas, you have to go where people aren't looking. You know, you have to get past the obvious stuff and like find something different and that's out there and unexpected, and then figure out how to bring it back into the flow. So, you know, I'm always looking for new ideas, new information, new ways to think of things, and new challenges. And
we always like to kind of, when we're reaching the end of the interview, in a lot of ways, we like to almost imagine sort of like a time travel scenario where you get to go back to like 13-year-old Abe and give him one piece of advice. Like, you step out of the time travel machine, you have one piece of advice you can give 13-year-old self. What would it be and why?
Well, other than you don't have to smoke that much weed. Yeah, beyond
that helps though. That would be a good piece of advice.
No, that was a great piece of advice, actually.
Put the bong down.
I think, like, you know, I take risks, but be smart about it, right? Like, you want to figure out how do you take a safe risk, you know, like figure out how to take safe risks. Like, you don't want to take dumb risks, right? Like that, you know, you lose people like that. But if you can figure out ways to, like, you know, manage that risk, but actually take it at the same time, then that helps you push forward and figure out, you know, the path that'll lead you to interesting places.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for bringing us in, man. Thank you for talking, and really, like, it's a very cool space. Thank you so much.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.